Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us finally after a week of hiatus while we were out of town doing some fun martial arts stuff. Welcome to our Sunday talk once again. I'm one of your two hosts, Nor Kyle.
And I am the other one of your two hosts who is not Nur Kyle.
Thank you, Mushtaq. So I guess we got to do our spiel. We have not done that in a couple weeks, and it's part of the job, I guess. So if you're here with us live, thank you for being here. And if you're watching on the replay, we are happy to have you with us as well in spirit. And thank you for watching and joining in with us. You can always do that like, comment, and subscribe thing if you want to express your love and adoration of our group work that we try to do here together.
Or you can like our channel and subscribe to it if you hate us and you want to know when we post videos so you can go and hit the thumbs down button.
Oh yeah, you've got some loyal haters too. So
yeah, our most loyal person is somebody who shows up every week just to hate our videos.
We appreciate that. Thank you. Other than that, I guess I should still announce that our retreat is still open for registration, signing up. We have one or two more spots left that we would love to offer to people if they would like to join us and have been on the fence or have been waiting to get a little bit more funds together. The door is not closed to you. Just let us know. You can sign up for the mailing list, get some emails. You can get in touch with us via email to ask your questions and let us know if you have any concerns that you've been working through and any of that stuff. Just get in touch with us. It's cool. That will be held May 8th through 12th, and we will be in southern Sweden. So we're very excited. We finally have everything in place to make this happen for sure. And I think it's going to be awesome, God willing.
It's going to be kind of cool.
Yeah. It's going to be really great to have people together in person, more or less for the very first time. So this is a big deal.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add, Mushtaq?
Just on an aside, we are almost at 2,000 subscribers. I am somewhat flabbergasted by that. And so to all of you who are crazy enough to subscribe to this channel, thank you so much.
Yes.
It will be a landmark.
And we thank you all for helping us make that happen.
Yes.
Obviously, we have been doing it very organically this whole way. We have not been doing a whole lot of advertising of any kind. And we've been very particular about the advertising we allow on our channel. So we don't need to get any deeper into that. We're just very grateful and appreciative.
Yeah. So thank you all for that.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I have to say. So what are we talking about?
Yes. So today we are talking about something that, we've mentioned. This is another one of those things we've often mentioned in passing and have discussed more in one-on-one sessions and smaller groups, but we feel we're ready to share with all of you a discussion on the topic of Zikr. Now, Zikr is an Arabic word that basically means remembrance or to remember. And you'll notice that this is kind of echoing a term we use often as well, self-remembering. Now, there is a relationship there between these two terms. So, Mushtaq, where would you like to begin?
We start with the idea that Dhikr is prescribed from the beginning of Islam as something that is very good to do. It says in the Quran things like, remember me and I'll remember you. That's God speaking. And we say that the universe exists because God is remembering the universe in every moment. If God got distracted and stopped remembering us, we go poof, there would be nothing there. So it's good to go both directions with this. I've actually got all sorts of things.
Yes. Pull up that stuff, huh? Where is it?
Yeah. Yeah, the Quran says, "O you who have believed, remember Allah with much remembrance." That's 33:41. And that's the same term, Dhikr. Now you'll notice that Noor and I pronounce the word slightly differently sometimes, most of the time.
Yeah.
In classical Arabic, the letter is a sound that is not quite in English. And it's sort of a TH with a D involved in it in strange and unusual ways. So you'll hear that. And then in colloquial Arabic of certain regions like Egypt, as well as in Persia and Turkey and Turkestan, they pronounce that letter as a Z rather than as a DTH or a THD or whatever. And it all means the same thing. It's all written exactly the same way.
In Arabic, you mean?
In Arabic,
despite
yeah.
it perhaps being transliterated a bit differently when
Yep.
we use it.
Yeah, you got to go to the original source. Because when you get into transliterations, you get all sorts of different spellings, depending on where you are in the world. But what is it? Zikr is putting one's full consciousness on something. In this case, on the divine reality. But you can do the zikr of anything. I can remember Noor and do frequently, hopefully on proper holidays and our anniversary and things like that. Keeps me from getting into trouble.
He's good at that, yeah. And likewise, of course. And yet we can also do things like the ticker of a flower or a tree or a river. And I remember our sheikh talking about that in the past, how you can learn so much from making a connection in that way too.
Yeah. But the ultimate connection and what we generally mean when we say dhikr is dhikr Allah, the remembrance of God. And in some ways, this is exactly analogous to Gurdjieff's self-remembering, because the self that you remember is not the ego, it's not the nafs, it is the essential self, which is the breath of the divine given to you.
And you can frame this idea of Allah or the divine however resonates for you as something that is kind of holistic, all-inclusive. It's the energy that animates all things, including ourselves and the environment around us. It is present in all things. And some people call that a higher power, some call it a universal essence. Any of those things are, going to be welcome metaphors for a discussion like this, in which it's not going to be all Muslims who are doing this, and it shouldn't be, because this is a practice that is accessible to pretty much anyone who
You find this in every culture in one way or another. I mean, Christians do zikr, Jews do zikr, Hindus do zikr, Buddhists do a sort of dhikr. They don't have any deities, but they have something. Yeah, you find it everywhere. Now, we can divide the practice up into three kinds of dhikr. You have Zikr-i Jalali, which is the vocal zikr, the loud zikr. You have Zikr-i Qalbi, which is the zikr of the heart. And then you have Zikr-i Khafi, which is the secret zikr. So the verbal zikr, the loud zikr, the spoken zikr it's what you see when you, and we'll post a few videos to the forum so you guys can see various ways that it's done, but it's chanted, people are going through body movements, and often there are singers who are singing either chapters from the Quran or sacred poetry from Sufi saints or things like that. There's often musical instruments involved, drums, flutes, oud, saws, all the cool things. And it's quite quite an event. Then the zikr of the heart is done inwardly. So it is the repetition of the ideas, the words of the zikr, but done internally, so nobody knows that you're doing it. And it's a form of meditation. Now, some people say that the zikr of the heart and the secret zikr are the same, but they're not. The zikr-i khafi, the secret zikr, the hidden zikr, is non-verbal. If you're doing the zikr of the heart, you're sitting there inside going la ilaha illallah, or whatever you're doing, whatever your teacher has given you to do, but you're saying the words to yourself over and over again. Now imagine that, but with no words. It's very hard at first, but it can be done. And this is at least within our school, considered the supreme zikr. The ultimate that you can do is the hidden zikr with that transcends the linguistic circuit.
Mr. Crunchy Zikr Supreme.
Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about this, as I said, in one-on-ones and small groups, but we have not talked about it in our main talks because this tends
scares
to be
people.
a topic that people find challenging. It is pretty explicitly, quote unquote, spiritual. And some people have a degree of comfort with that and others do not. But it is important that we cover these subjects that are pretty foundational to Sufism in general and to our tradition in particular. I saw that James was unmuted for a moment. Did you have a thought you wanted to share, James?
Oh, it's a bit peripheral. You talk about people being worried about spiritual / religious. I vaguely recalled at one point Gurdjieff described his method as, and it was a very dramatic quote, for the monsters without religion. I can't remember where I heard it from. And just this sort of this tentativeness around spirituality and religion, either it's because certainly our Monday to Saturday metaphysics is reductionist materialist, but we might get religious on Sundays. And then there's our secular goal of yoga or mindfulness for personal health or personal gain, but not for any sort of sense of something beyond oneself. I just wondered if if you would perceive those as being the themes that make people wary, maybe.
Likely. We are trained not to consider the divine reality. Religion has ruined it for a lot of people. You get the idea of God as this grumpy old man with a ledger book that is going around and putting check marks behind your name, either in black or red. And then at some point, he's going to count them up, and either he's going to beat on you forever, or he's going to put you in some boring paradise.
A not so friendly Santa Claus, right?
Yeah. And this is not our conception of God. We don't believe in God. We experience the divine reality. And there's a difference between these two things. Belief has nothing to do with what we do. Belief is acting as if something is true without evidence. We go from personal experience, and we have to frame it in some way, but we understand that there is a unitary consciousness that is fundamental to the universe existing. And we understand that there are ways to directly experience and interact with that. And this is one of the main ways when done correctly. And it's not like God comes and hangs out and has coffee with you. It is you realize that you have spent your entire life with an umbilical cord that connects you to the divine reality. And that's what feeds you. That's one way to talk about it. There is no way to say the truth about this.
Mm-hmm.
You can only experience it.
But some symbolic or poetic statements do orient us towards that truth. On an experiential level, they can guide us. So
Yeah, they can fingers pointing at the moon. Yeah.
Yeah.
My
And so
favorite.
the finger.
My favorite
Sorry.
of that is opening lines from the Divani Shams from Rumi that goes, "You're drunk and I'm crazy," or "I'm drunk and you're crazy. Who's going to take us home? I told you not to drink all the wine, and yet here you are, completely smashed out of your brains." That's yeah.
But that is the essence of it, yeah. And as you're mentioning, James, and I think others will relate, as I was describing earlier, yeah, we have these different ways of pointing that will resonate more deeply for each of us.
Yeah,
If I could indulge this bee in my bonnet for 1 second longer.
go for it.
Okay, some fingers point at the moon, some fingers don't.
Yeah.
The fingers pointing at the moon, even though they are poetic / symbolic, whatever you want to call them, they're in a certain sense more true or less untrue than statements or images or symbols that don't point at the moon.
Are they?
By virtue of their function, they're orientating us to a broader reality, even if they can't encapsulate that broader reality.
Allah says in the Quran, "I created good and I created evil," which we take to understand as there is nothing that exists that does not come from the mind of God, including the negative shit, including the poems of despair and agony. It may just be an uncomfortable way to get to the same place.
Oh, I wouldn't know.
Yeah. Sometimes it's very surprising. You know, the beautiful poems are great, but oftentimes they just play on the emotions.
Mm.
Sometimes one of the things about Rumi, for instance, is that a lot of his poems, not the most popular ones, but a lot of his poems are poems of agony, because of the loss of Shams. And so, you know, the person who he loved the most in the world, who was his teacher, who was the one who catalyzed him into full awakening, is then taken away from him by his own students. And so not all of his poems are happy-go-lucky, love everybody, spin around, all of that. A lot of them are, oh my God, what happened? There is this longing inside of me that cannot be fulfilled. That which I loved has been removed from my existence. But those are not the ones that get published in collections in the West.
Made into memes on Instagram and such.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just finish my rant by saying I must admit that looking back in times of despair, I wouldn't imagine I am where I am now. Like back in the times of despair, I thought, well, that's the end. But then after that, there's been a couple of tastes of something broader, and now I've wound up here with you guys.
Yeah. That's not so bad. I mean, yes, you suffered unendurably, but no, you're here.
Well, I endured.
Yep.
A lot of people have had it worse than me.
So they say that people don't move when they're comfortable. And I find this to be pretty true, because I can think of times in my life where I was like really comfortable. I didn't have to do anything that I didn't want to do. I could just sit there, watch the world go by. And eventually God gets fed up and goes, yes. And you realize that you need to move. And by the way, you know what God stands for, right? Did you know that God is an acronym? It stands for grow or die. G-O-D. Remember that. Grow or die. But anyway, back to Zikr.
Well, Zikr can be a part of this reckoning, as a way of building recognition.
Yeah.
Of the presence of this divine reality that is in fact present, whether we're paying attention or not. Whether we're able to recognize it for what it is or not. So we were last talking about the 3 kinds of Zikr, and you were beginning to differentiate between this Zikr of the heart and this secret Zikr.
Yes. And the vocal Zikr. In our tradition, it started out as you would do the Zikr of the heart, and you would do the secret Zikr once you were able to accomplish it. And vocal Zikr wasn't there. It wasn't a part of what we did until one of the sheikhs of our tradition, a fellow by the name of Khwaja Mahmud Farag, I can't pronounce his last name very well. Farghani, it should be a V, not a W. Farghnawi, yes. Who lived, he was like 6 generations in, I think. He is often identified as a Naqshbandi, but he's not a Naqshbandi. He was born 150 years before Bahauddin Naqshband. There was no Naqshbandi order when he was alive. He was instructed by the divine reality to create a kind of Zikr, a vocal Zikr that is called Zikr Alaniya. Alaniya.
We're having trouble with
words tonight.
Zikr al-Alaniya.
Yes. Now, this is a particular kind of zikr. It's also known as the present moment zikr. And it is a vocal zikr done in congregation. It's a little bit different than some of the other ones because traditionally you don't use music and you don't use songs. You just use the words. And it is designed to create a group flow, for lack of the better term.
I think that's a good way to describe it.
Yeah. And the thing is, there is danger in all zikr. And the danger is using it to go to sleep. When you have beautiful music playing and people who sing beautifully and the right poems going on, and you're sitting there and you're chanting, you know, you're going la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, and all of that's going around behind you, and you're part of this divine orchestra. It's actually really easy to just go to sleep, to go into a trance.
To get lost in the good vibes, man.
Yeah. And the moment you do that, you are no longer doing zikr according to our particular tradition. We do not do zikr to go to sleep and have ecstatic experiences. This is not the point. The point, as Nora wrote here, zikr al-niyya is a form of zikr that is performed aloud with the tongue and the heart in a group. And the thing that we pulled this from said and individually, but we don't consider that to be entirely accurate. This is definitely meant to be a group practice. The trick to it is, first of all, you understand what you're saying. A lot of people come to the circles of sheikhs and they do these zikrs and they're just making sounds. They don't even know what the words mean. And this is not what we want. What we want is full understanding of the words that we're using. If we are doing a zikr that includes the al-haq, haq means the real and the true. And we have to understand the meaning of that which we invoke. It is, God is the only reality, the only truth. Other than God is not real, because all things other than God are dependent upon God for their existence. And so that means that that which is dependent has no reality outside of that which gives it its existence. And so we hold that entire concept in our mind as we are tuning ourselves into this name. Does that make sense, or am I completely blathering off into la la land here? Let me check in with you. Who was it?
Jefferson here.
Yeah.
It makes sense to me. I've just been, you offered a few dhikrs and I've been doing them regularly. And sometimes, I've been faithful to the meaning that you described around, because you gave really like kernels, concise, like Subhamala, the all light comes from and returns to. You gave some examples I wrote down, and
Yeah.
as I practice, it's what's been fascinating is that it seems like meaning evolves, but not from my head. I don't know how to say it differently, but like the meaning evolves because I'm staying awake with it, or maybe my heart's giving feedback. I don't know, but
Yeah, and we would say that the meaning evolves in the heart and then is communicated both upward to the head and downward into the body, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and for people for whom uh these languages can be difficult for many of us if it is not our first language. And yet we can still do our best to pronounce them as well as we can, but also dig deep into these meanings that are also going to merge intuitively, which I think is part of what Jefferson's describing. So it does involve perhaps a little bit of book learning if these are not things that are ingrained in you know, your native language, if it's not Arabic or Turkish or Persian. But I do think that there are ways to gain access to this deeper meaning by being in relationship with these terms and these phrases. So try not to be too intimidated. It does take a little bit of bravery. I think anytime there are these practices that involve going a little bit deeper, doing invocations and things like that, it is easy to be a little bit afraid or to feel silly perhaps. But again, I invite you to just simply give it a chance and see what emerges from that.
Yeah. So there is one other part to true Zikr as we understand it, which is the breath. When we do Zikr, it is done with the breath, on the breath, synchronized with the breath. And breath is essential to the Zikr. Does that make sense? I could sit here and just go, Allah, 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 right? And nothing wrong with it. But if I synchronize my body with the word and I'm going, ah,
You're breaking up a little bit because it's not used to this sound.
yeah. But what I'm doing is getting this long exhale of the word and then a short in between. And this begins to create what the Rafai dervishes call the sawing breath. Because when it's done vocally very loudly, it sounds like somebody's sawing wood. It's kind of cool.
Hopefully we'll be able to find some recordings so people can
Yeah,
see this
I've got
done.
some in
Yeah.
a folder somewhere. We'll throw them up.
But in any case, you're using the breath to empower the
Yes.
recitation.
And to synchronize your entire body with the divine name. Yeah, the words that we use are called the most beautiful names, of which we recognize 99 main ones. But as Ibn Arabi points out, Allah has infinite names. Each name is one quality. It is Allah's immanent aspect, his impingement upon the universe. The entire universe is made up of the qualities of God, is what we would say. And so we can tune into any of them. And in some ways, these zikrs are tuning into a particular quality. I occasionally suggest on in the comments section, because there are only two of us and we have to scan all of the comments so that we don't get trolls dropping weird stuff in there, that sometimes it will take a few days before a person's comment gets posted. And we suggest that a person says to themselves, Ya Sabur, over and over again. And Sabur is patience, patient one. And so it actually works.
Yes. So it's a way of invoking this kind of sense of patience. And what's interesting is even though we are invoking a specific, we could say, I guess, frequency, I guess. I don't want to stray too much into weird new age territory, but it's an appropriate word for this, I think. Even within that, there is the echo of all the other facets of reality within it. So that's an important piece to remember to this too. Nothing is in isolation.
Yep. You pick a name or a group of names that become the tonic note, as it were. But within that note are contained all of the harmonics of every note possible. So you're always invoking the infinite names, but one more than others, which is good because some of the names you don't want to invoke. Very dangerous to do. Like if you go around going, Ya Qahar, you may not like the result.
Now, how would you define that? Yeah.
That's it's one of God's power aspects, and it's the power that smashes things.
And there's a place for that, obviously.
Yeah.
But in your general everyday life, you may not.
Yeah,
want to be
it's not your job to go around invoking.
Yeah. Good to be conscientious.
Yeah, and that's another one of the dangers of doing this without a certain amount of help and instruction. There are some zikrs that are absolutely perfectly safe to do, like the zikr of La ilaha illallah. There is no God but God. There is no reality but the divine reality. Anybody can do that and benefit from it. You can do that all day long. You can do it morning, night, whatever you want to do, and it's good. It's completely benign. And so there are ones like that that are recommended. Anybody can do them. But there are some that you have to have a little skill and practice before you use them, and you only use them for accomplishing certain things. You can use Ya Qahar against your own ego at certain parts, in certain parts of the path. But you don't want to try that on your own.
So how might people encounter some of these names? Like, I guess what I mean by that is, we've only mentioned a couple. We've only mentioned like a phrase and a couple names. So how do you think people should go about seeking these zikrs in
the best way is to talk to somebody who's been trained in the art. If you don't have anybody like that, go to Wikipedia and look up the 99 names of God, and it'll give you the whole list. And you can look through them and go, would it be good to invoke this name? You can always do that. I mean, nothing here is secret. But I will tell you that you are best off when beginning if you don't have instruction to use either La ilaha illallah, there is no God but God, or Allah, or Ar-Rahman. You can evoke Ya Rahman, Ya Rahim. And usually you do those two together. And those are all entirely safe and healthy to use.
So for those who don't know, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahim, that would be it's usually translated as the most, you're talking to the name, basically. You're saying, bringing it into yourself, you're referring to it as if
It's
is,
evocative.
yeah. And you're saying, oh, most beneficent, oh, most merciful. Oh, truth, Yahak.
Yeah. And those are ways that anybody can practice this. Now you can do it aloud, like I said, with your breath, ideally. The rule is long breath out, short breath in. Or you can practice it silently within yourself, saying the word, understanding the meaning of the word, knowing the meaning, knowing what you're evoking, just in your heart. And other than that, in my opinion, it really helps to have instruction. And you don't have to get instruction from us. This is not a commercial for you guys to come and go, hey, Mushtaq, tell me how to do Zikr. There are probably thousands of people who are qualified to teach Zikr in one form or another. You can find any of them. As a matter of fact, we don't want you to be coming and doing that because we only have so much time in the day.
Yeah, but I mean, I think there's something to be said about taking an opportunity to learn about these things for yourself, even as you perhaps seek help in figuring out how to apply it. I think that this is a pretty interesting practice, even just on the face of it. Like, what are all these names? How do people come to describe this divine reality? What are these facets and how are they framed? And if you get really deep into it, you can explore the root letters of these names and how those are tied to other words that enrich the meaning of these names even further. Now, that's the thing that's unique to the Arabic language and other Semitic languages, because they have such ancient structure that involves these little seed sounds that have different meanings depending on how they relate to one another. But, you know, you don't have to go any deeper down that rabbit hole than you yourself want to, of course.
So that's a basic outline of what Dhikr is. And of course, we have talked about self-remembering as a form of Zikr. And I'll put some links up to to a couple of videos that involve that, because Gurdjieff incorporated this in his work, though he left out all of the Islamic stuff, which is understandable for the place and time.
Yeah.
So, questions, thoughts, answers?
Yeah, I saw Osama was unmuted, so
Good.
yeah.
Yeah,
By the way, I want to make sure, how would you prefer that we pronounce your name?
you pronounce it just right, Osama.
Okay, great. Just wanted to
Yeah.
make sure. Thank you.
Thank
So,
you.
Yeah, we are notorious for finding ways to pronounce names that nobody has ever heard before.
Oh yeah, I got that. People pronounce my name Osman all different kind of ways.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but what I wanted to share is, even you know, I speak Arabic. I was born in Jordan, and even speaking Arabic, it doesn't necessarily mean that I understood the true meaning of those names. because, you know, those names were just used, you know, I heard them all the time. They're used all the time. So when it came to invoking those names, there was that concept that you shared, Mushtaq, about you're really sitting with the concept of the name as a totality. That's really helpful, because the name by itself, even with the regular meaning, like, okay, the al-haq means the truth. That, like, okay, I'm saying the truth, or the truth. There doesn't really, there isn't much going on. But to sit in the concept of the absolute reality of the absolute truth, that divine, it does something different internally. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out, that even for people who speak Arabic or Persian or you know, Turkish or whatnot, understanding the meaning, the deeper sense of the meaning is very, very crucial to that. And I also have a question regarding Dhikr al-Qalb, the Dhikr of the heart. Is that similar to mantra meditation? Is there a point of transcendence in that?
Yes. Mantra is just the Sanskrit word for zikr, basically, even though they would define it slightly differently. But yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. And you are aligning yourself with a particular aspect of the divine reality. You know, you may do a Shiva mantra or a Krishna mantra, and people go, oh, you're thinking of a god. But we understand that as these are just ways to look at the attributes of the divine being that were given a long time ago. And so, whereas Shiva can be a dude with a blue throat, in which case he becomes like an idol, or Shiva is this concept that means certain things to us, just as a divine name does. Divine names are easier. The Asma al-Husna are like way easier than working with some ways of doing it, because they're impersonal.
The divine names, that's the term you were using.
Now, is there a point within the dhikr of the heart where we lose the mantra, we lose the name, and we're in a point of transcendence? Is
that's where you get into what we think of as zikr khafi, where you enter into that hidden zikr, that secret zikr that has no sound, has no name, has no words, but is just a direct apprehension of the divine.
Right.
And that's what we're aiming for. That within our particular tariqah, that is the gold standard.
In that, there's the possibility to carry that through all the things that one is taking part in a day, because it's not quite that it's happening in the background, but it's not as, okay, I'm going to sit here and say some words in my head, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And that's, we work with the 9 precepts, of which the 4th is Khalwat Daranjuman, which means solitude in the crowd. To be inwardly in your zikr while outwardly completely engaged in the world. To feed your family, do your job, do whatever you're doing, but at all times to have that remembrance as an essential part of yourself. It takes a week or two of practice to get there.
Thank you.
Great questions, and thank you for sharing from your perspective, Osama, because that's important that we get that. You know, that is not our experience, but that experience is certainly deeply informative, given that this is the language that you've grown up with. And there is that, I think, no matter the thing that we grow up with and have like that vast familiarity with tends to be something that we take for granted, or we are sort of just like so immersed in it. It's like being a fish in water, and we can't really get directly at it until we take time specifically to focus on it. So you were spot on there. Yeah, thank you. Jefferson.
Yeah. Well, two things. One was how does your tariqa view? I think the word is silsila.
Silsila, that means chain.
Yeah.
And that is, for a silsila to be alive, it has to have a direct connection from teacher to student to teacher to student from the beginning to now.
The beginning meaning.
Yeah. The beginning meaning the Prophet Muhammad. Contrary to what some people have said, Sufism originates with the Prophet. There were plenty of Sufi-like practices before him in various parts of the world, but they were not what we considered Sufism. That started there. That's a particular line and quality of the work. And so all silsila trace back to the Prophet Muhammad. And from there, you look at how they are transmitted, which of the Prophet's companions taught this person, who taught this person, who taught this person, who go all the way down to Noor and I are sitting here and we're telling you stuff, and we are connected to our teachers who told us stuff, who were connected to their teachers who told them stuff. And we experience that as a living connection. And not in the sense of, we don't have force ghosts coming and telling us stuff, right? But there is this felt connection between us and the people who have gone before. It feels like this, a support, as it were. It's like they're rooting for us.
Mm. So in a way, it is kind of like Force Ghosts, but it's not like in the movies with like their
It would be
figures
fun
standing
if it
behind
were.
us, clapping each other on the shoulders and things like that. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it does feel. I mean, I can speak for my own experience that like the word ancestors, that's thrown around a lot these days, but the context in which I tend to use it most is in the context of our spiritual lineage.
Yeah.
And that feels quite present for me. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
yeah. Well, I mean, because the Gurdjieff thing is all new to me. I mean, I've been reading, that's all I've been doing. Before I met you guys, I was reading, and having senses and intuitions, but didn't have any practices until I came here. And the practices to me are no joke, if they're done with intent, like everything comes with intent, it's like there's things happening. And so then I'm reading, and then I see this silsila. I'm like, well, what did Gurdjieff take? I asked that because did Gurdjieff just make it, did he go to a universal access of things in some ways, or maybe, anyway, that question's not clear.
Yeah.
It's not clear yet.
And the answer will be unclear as well. Gurdjieff, we don't know if he took formal initiation into a particular tariqa. I expect that he did, because he was that kind of a person. And I expect that the tariqa that he took bayat, we call it bayat, with taking hand, was probably the Naqshbandiya. because they are all over the areas that he traveled. And a lot of his practices are very similar to theirs. And he mentions, he talks about in meetings with remarkable men, meeting the esteemed dervish Boga Eddin. Now, there's G's in there, and people don't understand that different languages will produce the symbols for a word in different ways. If you happen to be Armenian, you throw in some extra G's. So like we say Sarmun, which comes from various sources. But when you read Gurdjieff saying it, he will often put a G on the end because the dude is Armenian. And so Boga Eddin becomes Bahauddin, which is the name of Bahauddin Naqshband. So there's a hint there. And at the same time, he took from other places as well. It's obvious that he took from other places, but it's also obvious that he took a lot of cool stuff from his Sufi contacts. And yeah, so it's hard to say exactly what his silsila was. He implied that he was given the task of bringing this stuff to the West. And I know certain, especially in Turkey, there are certain Naqshbandi groups that considered Gurdjieff a thief who took stuff that he didn't know enough about to really be using and just ran off with it.
And we make jokes about that from time to time ourselves too.
Yeah. So who can say what Gurdjieff's silsila was? But I'm pretty sure, as a matter of fact, I am convinced in my own being that it was connected to the Naqshbandiya, and therefore they're cousins of ours. Our silsila and the Naqshbandi silsila originated in the same place with the same person, a fellow by the name of Yusuf Hamadani. So a lot of the practices look very similar. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great. The other part of it is self-remembering. You shared a video about the cube exercise, and while doing that exercise, I think it was to be in a state of self-remembering as you were producing or attempting to produce the cube. I don't know if I heard this on one of your earlier talks or if it just but I attempt to be in self-remembering when I'm enunciating, when I'm doing Dhikr.
That's exactly perfect.
Okay. Because to me, it's like anything to stay awake, it's like anything, open my eyes, close my eyes, open my eyes, counting. So, okay, I just wanted to run that.
And that's the interesting thing about this. Zikr can help you awaken, and at the same time, it can put you to sleep. I mean, it is totally trance producing if you don't know what the hell you're doing.
I find it pretty interesting that you're saying whatever works, I do that. Open my eyes, close them, get up, wiggle around, sit down again, whatever helps. And I think that's a great attitude to have, because it is about staying awake and not getting so comfortable that you do the equivalent of falling asleep in your chair and starting to drool, So yeah.
We've never done that.
Never.
I never. No.
Thanks.
Other thoughts and questions? Be careful, because if we don't hear from you, Nora's going to start calling your name.
That's how I roll.
Cherie has something.
Yeah.
So with this intent, is this a form of worship? You haven't used that word.
I have not used that word because it is so overused and people don't understand what it means.
So what does it mean for you?
So what worship means for me is to open myself up to the connection with the divine reality. It does not mean that I have to sit around and tell God how cool he is. God already knows how cool he is. He does not need me to bolster his ego. And that's what
Yeah.
passes for worship these days. And I'm particularly sensitive to that because I grew up around a lot of fundamentalist Christians, and they're always, praise God, praise the Lord. You must worship the Lord. And to them, worship means telling God how cool he is.
And I know you know this already, Mushtaq, and we can take it for granted for the most part. But the people who are new here, just understand that when we say he, we really mean that in the most inclusive sense. Like,
Yeah.
God does not have a gender.
Yeah, God does not have gender.
Unfortunately, that's just a convention that has been pretty well ingrained in many of us. So,
I mean, think about it. If you attribute gender to the divine reality, then you have turned the divine reality into a sort of idol.
yes. So,
Yeah.
in brief, we try to avoid that kind of conceptualization.
Yes. God is not a mean old man sitting in the clouds waiting to smite you.
Yes, evil Santa. Yes.
Yeah.
But Shuri, I want to check in with you and ask if that has addressed your question regarding worship or not.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Being open to the divine reality is a perfect answer.
Yeah. I mean, for me, worship looks a little bit like making that connection and going, wow.
Mm.
So that sense of wonder and awe that one experiences when one is connected to the divine or when one apprehends one's connection to the divine reality is worship.
I have a sense of trust in leaning into that versus trying to manufacture something.
Yeah. That sounds about right.
Yeah.
There's a different quality to the worship of idolizing something or a being or an entity, or the way you describe it, but leaning into something where you feel that awe and wonder and trust and safety and security and all of those different things. As you say, there's 99 is just a figure of speech, because those qualities are infinite, and there's no sense of punishment or I have to do so many things before I'm recognized. That there's already that connection there. We're remembering that connection instead of trying to establish it or create it, or not putting this in a very clear way. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah. Yep.
That this remembering is a critical understanding of what is already there.
Yes, I was going to say, it's like recognizing what is already there.
Yeah. And you enter into a state of worship when you feel gratitude for that. Gratitude is an essential part of worship. Shakur, we say. And you experience the divine reality and you go, wow. And it's like you feel so grateful to get to be part of this bizarre universe that we find ourselves in. It is infinitely amusing in its own way. And how cool is that?
So the argument that I have with my family for not going to church, and they're all evangelicals, and I said, but nothing separates me from the love of God.
Yes.
Nothing. And I cannot make them understand my position.
It's a
Yeah.
paradigm shift. It's a really big reframing of
Yeah,
one's
basically
relationship
the Islamic
to the
view,
universe. Yeah,
or the Sufi view, I should
I
say.
think that's important too.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
Is that the entire universe is church. And there's a hadith to that effect. The Prophet Muhammad said, all the world is a mosque except for an outhouse or a graveyard.
Mm.
And even then.
And even then, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's what I'm getting out of this talk, is that there's a leaning into it.
Yeah.
That what is already there.
And you can do this without being religious in the least.
Yeah.
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 And that's something I kind of like about the divine names too, is that it gives us an opportunity, if we have some weird feelings around the word God or Allah or whatever, you can recognize that there are many faces to this thing called God or whatever, and many access points to that.
Mm. Mm. Thank you.
So I want to read Jefferson's comment, and
Yes,
then
please.
I saw that James was unmuted, and then I want to touch base with people we haven't heard from. So Jefferson says, Zikr, as I'm experiencing it, seems to be something like bringing the fragmented self over and over back to reflect from or into the one.
That would be exactly right. That's a perfect way to say it. If we had heard this before, we wouldn't have had to do this talk, because that's the whole essence of the talk.
Well, there you go. The
Yeah.
snippet, the synopsis. Thank you, Jefferson. All right, James, you had a thought you might like to share.
Well, like a lot of my thoughts, it's a bit waffly, so I'll beg your indulgence. This whole idea of there being no chasm between us and God and the divine. Now, when I was brought up in Lutheran Christianity, that there was a chasm, an insurmountable chasm between us and the divine, was crucial to article of faith. It could only be bridged through God's initiative. And God was hidden. He was the Deus absconditus, so he was not here. Now, so from what I've been gleaning from Islam, of course, I should add that that chasm necessitates the personal savior, necessitates Christ as the exclusive Messiah, as the God-man that comes down from above the chasm and, you know, comes and pays us a visit. And so God is absent except in sacramental form, special sacraments that the church has. Otherwise, God is away. Now, what I liked about what I know of Islam so far is it doesn't give Jesus Christ that superhuman status and that exclusive one and only status. It's like some exclusive one and only avatar. But I also gather, I can't wrap my head around, how does it work? You know, God is everywhere, but there is a limitation when it comes to human beings or the creation or something, that there still is some kind of difference in some way. It's
No.
not the, no.
No.
I'm not-
Allah says in the Quran, I am closer to you than your own jugular vein.
Jugular vein, yeah.
Yeah. Our understanding is God is immanent in the entirety of the universe. It's like, the old saying, split wood and you find me there, which I think it was Meister Eckhart who came
It's a Gnostic gospel. I think it's Gospel of Thomas.
Yeah, it could be. But that idea, look under a rock and there is the divine reality. There is no place where it isn't. We create the separation with our own egos.
Yes. And that separation
Yeah.
is based on illusion and misunderstanding.
Yeah,
Yes.
perception, yes, and we're forgetting. I think
Yeah,
that's another.
literally forgetting.
Mhm.
But in every moment, right now, this instant, Allah, the creator of the entire universe, is remembering you and me
Mm.
and M and Osama and Cherie, because we're here, we exist, and we exist through that. We're entirely dependent on that.
We're empty of a self-existent. We depend totally on the divine ground.
Yeah, we are not self-existent. If we were self-existent, we would be a partner to God.
Mm.
So we are not self-existent, but we are existent through God doing the zikr of us. There, Allah Most High is doing the zikr of James at this very moment, which is a weird thing to think about. And yet, that's kind of what's going on. And if he, she ever stopped, you'd just go, pop.
Mm.
What happened to James? God forgot him.
Yes. Now,
This is the most theological talk we've ever done, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's challenging.
I'm sorry, that's me. I'm a theologian.
That's okay. I love this stuff. I love thinking about it. I try not to scare people. And there is nothing more scary in the universe than God. But I think that is man's fault, not God's fault.
So I see that M is unmuted. She probably has
Yes.
something to share too.
James has brought something to my heart. There's a hadith Qudsi that says, how strange, Allah is saying this, how strange it is, I don't fit in the heavens or the earth, but I fit in the heart of the believer, or of the one that is left his heart open.
Yes.
So it's beautiful.
Love that one too. Yeah.
Yeah. Hadith Qudsi means a divine, a message from God that is not contained in the Quran, but is still an authentic message of God. And it's usually was given by the prophet. I mean, that's the only ones that we can really count on. So there's a few of them, and that's a particularly good one.
I have a humorous anecdote to add to my little spiel if you want to hear it.
Absolutely. God laughs all the time.
I was once damned to hell on the most politest terms possible by a street preacher when I explained my growing belief that there was no chasm between man and God, and there was no necessity for the Messiah, that if God was going to be the omnipotent all, there couldn't be any place that God was not. God couldn't be that small. And he looked at me and said in very polite terms, well, I'm terribly sorry, but I'm afraid you are damned to hell. Very politely. Not even condescendingly or even sorrowfully, just like he was apologizing that he was going to have to disconnect my electricity or something. It's the strangest damnation I've ever received. I've more fiery ones in the past, but that was very polite middle class damnation. I don't know. That's it.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Yeah,
not
and it's
awesome,
amusing
but
because
amusing. Yes.
the person who does that is creating partners with God, we call that. If I go, James, you're damned to hell, I'm taking on God's job. Or I'm acting as if I have some special revelation from the divine reality that you suck, and that I have God in my back pocket. So anybody who's going around damning anybody else to hell is actually treading on very thin ice. And we have that idea is reinforced for us over and over again. You know, I've told this before, I'm probably going to tell it again, like right now, the story of Moses and the madman. So Moses is walking through the desert and he sees this guy who is jumping up and down and then rolling on the ground and then getting up and jumping up and down and then rolling on the ground. And Moses is looking at him and he goes, what's going on here? So he goes up and he's asked the guy, what are you doing? And the man says, I'm praying. And Moses said, no, that's not how you pray. Let me teach you how to pray properly. And so Moses teaches him how to pray properly, and then he goes off. And Moses comes to a river. It's a big river. There's no boat. So he just starts walking across the water. And in a second, he's like halfway across, and this man comes running out again after him, and he runs along the top of the water to him and says, Moses, Moses, please help me. I couldn't remember what you told me on how to pray. And Moses is looking at him, standing on the water with him. And he says, just do as you were doing. There's a message in there for all of us. Now, the thing with the thing with Jesus, the Muslim view of Jesus is very interesting. Isa, we say. We acknowledge the virgin birth. We acknowledge his miracles. We acknowledge him as being one of the greatest teachers to ever exist. All of that stuff. But we do not say that he is God, because if you have a bottle, you cannot fit the ocean in that bottle. That's my basic explanation. Jesus is human. Jesus was sent as a teacher and a prophet. And the virgin birth happened. I mean, Christians talk about it. Muslims have a whole chapter named after Jesus' mother, right? That talks about the Annunciation and the birth and all of this. So as far as we're concerned, that's actually a tenet of the faith, is that you got to believe that all that stuff that they said about Jesus was true. And he wasn't God. Because only God is God. Nobody else is God. Something my teacher used to say to me all the time is, remember, God is God and you're not. And it's interesting because if you read the authentic words of Jesus, which you find a little bit of in the Gospels, it sounds like Sufism. And my teacher said, yeah, Jesus was sent and he taught Sufism generally to everybody. He taught the path. And it was so hard that nobody could do it. So Muhammad had to come to give everybody an easier way for reasons.
For reasons. So yeah, I mean, that's like that's a talk unto itself, really.
Yeah.
But
yeah, we've talked a little bit about Jesus in some of our talks, because I'm fond of him.
I think we discussed the Sermon on the Mount at
Yes.
one point, which is what you're referring to when you say that his message carried much of what is so intrinsic to the Sufi tradition before there was a Sufi tradition.
Yeah, and the Sermon on the Mount is, at least the version in Matthew, is almost undoubtedly the actual words of Jesus. One of the few places that we can look at the Gospels and go, yeah, he probably said that. As you know, the Gospels are all written in Greek. We do not have the original writings, which were in Aramaic, which is very close to Arabic. Aramaic was the language of the time, and it was the language of the common people. There were probably upper-class Jews who could speak Greek, almost undoubtedly. But the Sermon on the Mount was to a bunch of fishermen, right, and their families. These were not snooty Greek speakers. They spoke Aramaic. And I have a friend who's a Syrian Orthodox priest. These are the guys who do the liturgy in Aramaic. They speak Syriac Aramaic to this very day. And he's a computer programmer, and he wrote this program that translated the Greek text back into Arabic or back into Aramaic and then back into Greek, looking for places where it alliterated. And where it alliterates was probably originally written in Aramaic, because that's how it's done. If you listen to the Quran being read, it's a poem. It is one long poem of profound proportion. If you listen to the Torah as it's being read, it's the same. If you listen to the Greek gospel, it's not. But there are parts of it, when translated into Aramaic, are like the Quran and the Torah. They read like music. Does that make sense?
I think it's a lot to chew on, and we've gone
Yeah.
quite far afield, but I do think
Yes.
it's important to
Yeah, this is the fun stuff.
yeah, I mean, that's the relationship of Jesus to the Islamic and
Yeah.
Sufi tradition. Yeah. Yep. So, Emma, at some point I saw you unmuted.
Yes,
and
please
then
say things
Osama
to
has
us.
a thought as well.
Another story came to my mind and my heart when you were talking about Hazrat Musa's story of, I can't remember which sheikh he was. I think it was Abdul Qadir Gailani. And his teacher told all the students to take a chicken and slaughter it where no one can see. And they all rush off and find a place, and they come back thinking, oh, I found the best place, telling their teacher. But it was Abdul Qadir Gailani who said, I couldn't find it anywhere where I can't be seen, because God is seeing everywhere. God is everywhere. So he becomes later the owner, the teacher that takes on. So
And his chicken was very happy about that.
I'm sure. But coming to that understanding, and then his teacher actually acknowledging that's
Yes.
the truth. Like if that man that James was talking to had been, he would have actually said, yes, you got it. That's it. That's what the whole message is about. That we don't need any intermediaries. We're directly connected. And the 99 names actually is the key, I think, that brings, like Jefferson said, brings you back to the oneness. Allah has many names, and by necessity of that, there's multiplicity. And invoking on those names brings you out of the multiplicity and the duality and brings you back into the unity of the essence of all of those names.
Exactly right.
If we were saying on another talk where the heart, that we're mirrors to each other, that we are mirrors to one another. So the 99 names kind of polish that mirror. The more we invoke it, it acts to polish the mirror, bringing us both to understand the transcendence of God, meaning that it's not the creation, but at the same time, the immanence of God, that it's present in everything.
Yes.
And so that alignment then brings you into divine right order in yourself.
That sounds good to me. Thank you, Anne.
Who haven't we heard from? Lavita.
Osama has a thought. I saw him raise his hand.
Okay, so let's
And then, of course,
Lavita, because Lavita. Osama,
Yeah.
we're thinking.
Yes. Also to kind of add to what Jefferson also mentioned in the comments, it reminded me of the verse in the Quran that says, "Ala bi dhikrillah tatma'innu al-qulub." It is in the remembrance of God that hearts become at peace or in a tranquil state. And that's it's that oneness that kind of that I experience when performing dhikr, of kind of really what Jefferson has mentioned earlier in the comments. And that state of tranquility, which is also, I believe it might be a maqam or something like that as well.
Yeah, it is both
Good.
hal and maqam. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
state, station. Yeah.
State and station. Yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that verse because I find it very, you know, anytime that kind of my head goes in all different kind of ways, it's kind of like, oh, here it is. Let's just,
Yeah.
let me keep it simple for myself.
And that's exactly right. Again, that's one of my favorite verses in the Quran.
Mushtaq, was there not also another ayat in the Quran that says, call Allah by Rahman or by Rahim, call by whatever name?
Yes,
Yeah.
I
That
believe
too,
so.
yeah, like what Cherie was saying earlier about, you know, it's not that you're worshipping any of the name, or it's not, but whichever name you call upon, you're in that connection and coming to that oneness, like Osama was saying, just bringing you back into the oneness, whichever name you invoke, it's that.
Yeah, it helps for me to perceive all of the names. Like one of the names of Allah that I perceive all the time that is not in the 99 names is the Joker. Right? Allah has a wacky sense of humor, and it's all over the universe. I mean, think of the platypus, right? Who thought of the platypus? No human being could think of the platypus.
And yet they are adorable.
They are adorable. And like everything else in Australia, they're venomous.
Yeah.
Go figure.
Yes.
One of my favorite little memes is God says, "Let there be ants." There are ants, and the ants are going, "Oh wow, cool, God, thanks." Then God says, "And let there be anteaters." The ants go, wait, what?
I wanted to also touch on, I don't know if you spoke of it before I logged on, but the healing properties of the names. And I had issues with my eyes at one stage, and I would read Al-Basir, Al-Basir, Ya Basir, Ya Basir, and just reflecting on the all-seer.
Yes.
And like that with anything, like with your hearing, as Sami, you know, like you said, with sabr, with patience, when you need patience to invoke that name. But it's advised not to invoke as-sabr, or the patient one.
Yeah, because then you get all those opportunities to be patient.
Yeah. So it's really knowing the names and then bringing it in to when you need it for the healing to occur within yourself.
My sheikh was known as a great healer. And anytime he worked with somebody, he would, I mean, he might prescribe herbs, he might, you know, do a lot of things, but there was always a zikr that he would prescribe specifically for their illness. Do this until you're better. Yeah. And so, yeah, it attunes you to the right vibration for healing. All right, let's pick on Levita.
Hey, lady. Yeah.
I was just, I'm just listening, and what I've gathered from this is the Zikr is the way to create presence and focus with the divine and build a relationship with it as well. Do I have that right?
Pretty close, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think of it as it's a field phenomena. It's not here's the divine and here's you, and then there's this gap in between. It's like two poles of a magnet. We would be the negative pole. Allah would be the positive pole. And between us is a field that is created by these two poles. And you can't separate them. You cut a magnet in half and you don't get a magnet with one pole and another piece with another pole. You get two magnets that have both poles. And our relationship with the divine is very much like that. There cannot be separation.
I agree. I think what I was thinking was more the divine isn't separate from us, but sometimes we're separate because we're not present.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the forgetting that I mentioned.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. We call that the sleep of the machine.
Yeah.
And sometimes traditionally it's called heedlessness. Yeah. But I think with that in mind, this sense of, you know, forgetting to be present, I think that you do have the right of it, Lavita. Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of you can know a lot about medicine or healing or things to do when you're sick, but and it's most useful when other people are sick. But when we're sick, we need somebody else to go, did you forget? You take this, or you have to get some sleep, or you need some water.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Yes. And, you know, you point out something interesting for us, like, Mushtaq and I do these talks week in, week out, and yet we need to remind each other as well to be vigilant against sleep, falling asleep in the chair and drooling, you know? So it goes for all of us, yeah. Sometimes you gotta whack someone in the arm, like, hey, psst,
She's good at
pay
that.
attention.
She's particularly good at that.
Oh, so that bruise isn't from the workout you had this weekend.
No.
Thank you, Lavita. I'm
And she is a puppy.
yes.
Well, he's more like an old man.
They're
We're
all puppies in their heart.
Yes, yes. He's telling me it's time for me to go to bed because he wants to get in bed with me, and I'm kind of like
that. I like that. It's very
yeah, they're very bossy. My training is commencing.
All right. Well, I think that may be a hint to us to wrap up. Huh?
Puppy comes and says, time for sleep or dinner.
Yes.
Yes.
Puppy is doing this shoulder tap to keep us paying attention. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to switch back over to
Brady Bunch mode.
Brady Bunch mode. Here we are. And we can all say,
yeah,
goodbye.
Thanks everybody.
Yeah, thanks for hanging out with us and allowing us to go so far out into left field. And we'll see you next week.
See you next week. Bye, everybody.